when you're a punk or like a metal guy and you start to get into your like 30s, you start to find other hobbies. Like for a lot of people, that's like motorcycles or fucking CrossFit, or like you become a barber or a skinhead or something. And I think for me, it's just like, I used to keep some bottles up here, and then eventually like I got a lot of bottles, and my partner was like, "You can't keep those like on the shelf in the kitchen," and I was like, oh, "Okay." So I would have to like put them in a box somewhere, and then she was like, "You want me to get you like a bar cart for Christmas?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's a good idea." And so she got me this bar cart behind me, and then from there it's just kind of spiraled out of control, and now this whole, what you considered our dining room is now like a home bar slash tiki bar type thing.
Headbangers. Hi, welcome back to the Headbangers podcast, where your hosts Nathan and Brad. Here today we're joined by Fred from Unurnment. How you doing, man? Start off with.
I'm great. How are you guys?
Awesome.
Yeah, good.
Friday night, can't complain. No work for the weekend, so
yeah.
So one way that I would like to start off is, what is your funniest or worst tour story or gig story, or what sticks out in your mind as being the one?
Oh man, it's been so long since I played a show. It's hard to think of anything. The only thing that really comes to mind is an old band that I was in. We used to bring our friend with us on tour, and he's like notoriously like a lucky person.
Yeah.
But he also had had like a DUI, and so we tried to cross into Canada, and they wouldn't let him in because of his DUI. And he's like, "Oh, it's okay." So we just left him at the border, and he took a bus to the next city that we were going to be in when we came into the US, and he just hung out with a friend there, and like he went to like a casino and he won like hundreds of dollars. And so we left him at the border in Buffalo, I think, played like Toronto and wherever, and then came back through Detroit probably, and we picked him up, and he just had all this like money and had a blast, like
Wow.
without us,
There's always that like one friend or something that just gets absolutely lucky, and it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like we have that friend as well.
Everyone hates him because of it too, but yeah, it's a good person to have on tour, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy though, because I've heard so many stories from bands where it's like they'll be going into Canada and like they'll just be like a small charge, like the smallest one that you did one time, probably when you're like really young, and then like, yeah, no, you can't come in. They're so strict.
Yeah.
I have a friend that he was talking about he was gonna immigrate to Atlanta, like obviously in the States, and I can't remember what he got arrested for. Yeah, he was arrested for like, I think he got stopped with like literally a gram of weed, like a single gram, like the smallest.
That'll do it.
Yeah, and then they're like, after that, they're like, yeah, no, you can't come. And he like, what?
Yeah, I think in the case of like a DUI, it's like a 10-year thing. You can't come for 10 years, and our thing was that it had been almost 10 years, like not to the day, but it was the 10th year. And so when you try to cross, they're like, okay, that's like another 10 years that you can't come. And it's just
crazy.
Yeah. Eventually, I think he like wrote, because even after that, I played in a band like with him, and we played in Canada, and he wrote like a letter to, I don't know, some office, and got like a response saying, yes, you can come into Canada. You bring this piece of paper with you that says that this person allows you to come into Canada.
No way.
Well, that's good at least. That's at least like, at least you managed to get in.
But then
I gotta
like
say, sorry.
You go to like to Germany. Like I flew to Germany, and I get off the plane, and like there's like the customs line, and there's just nobody there, and you just walk into fucking Germany. Like
yeah,
it's crazy.
with Europe, like I think it's very light. I've noticed like in terms of like customs and that, like personally for me, I've not really been out the country since I was like 7 or something. But from friends going on holidays and stuff like that.
Yeah, I can confirm.
Yeah, they'd always come back going, I tell you what, customs was like, I have friends that would go to Amsterdam and they'd be like, oh, I brought some truffles back from Amsterdam. I'm like, how did you get that through customs? I'm like, they literally don't give a shit.
Yeah. When I went to Spain in a few months ago, I was like more thinking, is there anything else that we need to do? Like it seems like we're kind of getting off easy. Like, do we need to go here or here? And it's like, no, just wait. I was like, okay, well, I'm not complaining, but it just seems like it's definitely a lack of stuff to do.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think it's on like the same level as obviously the US with the TSA. Like we've just kind of just go through. Like we trust you. We're like everyone in Europe's just so trusting. Like we trust you, man. Like,
I'm thankful for it.
I've got to say the EP is unreal.
Thanks.
Obviously, you've got the inspiration from the old school death metal sound, but I also feel like there's a lot of new elements in there. But one thing I kind of want to ask you, well, it's like the production for one. The production's way better than like the stuff that you'd find in the 90s. But I kind of want to go into like the old school death metal sound. What do you think kind of drove you to that sort of sound, as well as like what we've recently seen quite a good resurgence of that sound coming back? Like I find a lot of people, a lot of musicians are really, really enjoying, like going like an old school route. So I kind of want to ask you, what in your opinion as well would be a reason for that?
I think when starting what would become Unurnment, it was like, this was like 2018. And so like bands like, Spectral Voice and like Blood Incantation and all those types of bands were really big. And I love that stuff. I play in a band that's more like a cavernous style, like old school death metal band. And I just kind of wanted to do something that was more like the death metal that I grew up with. And I'm like, I'm 37 now. So like late 90s, early 2000s, I was really into like Severed Savior and Deeds of Flesh and these types of like a more just like a less musical form of death metal. I actually, like, when I wrote that, the first song on the demo, not the EP that came out last year, but the thing that came out before that, the first song on that was written sort of as a way to try and make like less musical version of death metal. Like I was trying to just like test your patience with it, and I gave up on that making unmusical music type thing, and eventually I just tried to make it like good or whatever. But it was, I think, definitely a lot of the like resurgence of death metal is very heavily influenced by early 90s bands, like the classics or whatever, and I'm also influenced by that stuff. But for Unurnment, I specifically went for like a late 90s, early 2000s type of sound.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be fair, like death metal's gone in so many different directions. Like, I could probably name about 40 different categories of death metal that you've had over the years, but I think it's nice to see that there's so many bands that are like, hey, the old school death metal sound, that was pretty good on its own. Sometimes you can make a lot with that sound as opposed to like including all the other stuff. So I'm really enjoying to see, bands gravitating towards this sort of sound, because it's awesome to put it lightly. So I wanted to ask as well about the concept of it. So we spoke about, the musically, what inspired you. So yourself, your EP, Self-Immolation Suite, what's inspired the concepts, lyrically for that for you? Like what was going on, what drove you towards these concepts, and explain a bit about it.
I just basically, as soon as I finished the demo, I wanted to, I knew I wanted to do something else that wasn't like an LP. And I thought, I'll do like a single or whatever, because my thought being like, Unurnment isn't a real band. Like we can't play live. It's just me. And so in order to stay fresh in people's minds, I just keep putting music out like as often as I can. I'll do like a song here and a song there and an EP here or whatever. And I thought, oh, the next thing I'll do will just be one song. And then I started to think about it, and I was like, what if that one song was like 15 minutes long, And so Self-Immolation Suite really is like a suite in the, the classical sense of that word. It's one song. Ended up taking way longer to complete than I intended it to be. But yeah, it was just...
That's one of the things. Like I remember, because when I discovered you from 200 Stab Rooms. So I was listening to them, and when Spotify just kind of goes off what you've been listening to recently, and it recommended, oh, I'll check this out. And when I listened to the full EP, I kind of got the feeling that it felt like one song, because I listened to it all the way through, and it's very rare that I'll listen to an EP all the way through. But this one, I was like, I'm really, really enjoying this, so I'm gonna go through all of it. And it did feel like how it flowed. It did feel like it was meant to be one song, it's mad that you did mention that.
It doesn't give you the opportunity to pull out. It's, the one track fades and not fades. One track goes into the next.
Yeah.
The tracks change, but it's one like piece of music.
Yeah, I'd be sat there on the bus, and I'd be like, oh, okay, let's see how far I'm into the song. And I'd be like, oh, I'm halfway through the EP. And it was one of those things was like, I really like appreciate stuff like that, because I believe like Gulch, they did it as well with their EP, like where the like the end of each song is sort of like the start of the next one. And I love stuff like that, because it's like it's an actual listening experience opposed to like, here's a song, stop. Here's a song, spot.
Right.
Here's
yeah.
Like,
it for like immersive purposes.
Entertaining to listen to.
I'm surprised at how little people have actually mentioned that to me. That like, it seems like nobody's really noticed that it's one piece of music. They're all like, oh yeah, the 5 songs that are on the CP. It's like, well, if you listen, like the first riff in the first track and the first riff in the fourth track are the same riff. Like it repeats the riff because it's the same song,
No, it's really interesting, to be honest, because when you listen to it, you just feel fully immersed in it. If you listen to another album, you might get that bit, the song fades out, you're like, oh shit, I'm in reality again. Okay. But then like with this one, it's like you just get an absolute beating for 20, 30 minutes, you're like, fucking hell, amazing. Like, there's no, like you said, there's no room to breathe. You're just getting bombarded by these, crushing riffs and, fierce vocals. No, I like that. I think it's different to what you usually see, with like transitions in between songs. So I think it's cool.
Thanks.
Also, I really appreciated like a lot of the guitar squeals, because I'm a sucker for dive bombs.
I am too.
Because like every time I'm at band practice, like I'll always say to Jordan, I'm like, dive bomb. He's like, oh, are you sure this song's at like 2? I'm like, don't fucking matter. There's always room for a dive bomb. That was something I really appreciated.
Gratuitous use of guitar tricks is kind of like something I'm very into.
The thing is with dive bombs, I don't know what it is, but as soon as I hear it, you're there like, oh, someone's coming. Like, I mean, like it's like a switch that like just gets flicked in your brain where you're there like,
Sure. Yeah.
But as well, like one thing as well, obviously it's only you got like obviously writing this and going through this. Like, what's like, would you say is like the biggest like challenge when you're a one man, when like you sort of a one man project, as well as like probably one of the biggest benefits?
Well, the biggest challenge for me personally, I don't know about other one-man bands, but for me, it's the motivation. I mean, because I've played in bands for over half of my life now, and there's always other people in the bands who are like, we're all dependent on each other to do our part to keep going. And when it's just me, it's like, well, I guess I just won't work on music today, or, there's no, if there isn't a deadline for anything, it just kind of is hard to stay motivated, especially with like the last, almost 2 years now with COVID. Like so many people are like, oh yeah, COVID happened and we all just took it as an opportunity to make a record. And it's like, oh, I COVID happened for me and I just like lost all motivation to do anything with music, but that's just me. In terms of benefits, I don't know of many. Honestly, it's so much easier to work with other people than to work by myself, I think. But that's just me.
Yeah, no, I find because I was contemplating doing my own like solo project, but then like it sort of dawned on me. I'm like, well, I can't really play guitar very well. I said, and when it comes to like doing drums, nah. But it was one of those things where it's like, I think it's something that sounds so fun in theory, but when you're doing it and you realize it's all you, I feel like there's a lot more pressure because I've tried writing songs on my own, and I'll sit there for ages. I'm like, does this fit right? And you just I find like for me, like you get kind of stuck in your own head a little bit. Do you ever find that sometimes when you're writing as well?
Yeah, I think Unurnment is, if I had to, sum Unurnment up in a few words, it would be stuck in my own head. Like it truly is the music that I make by myself. And it's the first time I've done that. So, in older bands, I'd be writing music and I'd be like writing with the drummer that I'm playing with in mind, or writing with the abilities of the rest of my band in mind, or writing and having in mind like, oh, this person in the band wants something to sound like this or whatever, And with Unurnment, there's no, I guess that would be the benefit of having a one-man band, is that there isn't that. It's just, what music do I want to make? I'll make it. It'll take me a year to finish, 15 minutes worth of music. And I might like hate working on it for like certain periods. It might be like just a grueling experience of sitting at the computer for hours and hours and hours. But it's kind of cool to finish it and have this glimpse of like, this is completely me. This is music that was made and not filtered through anyone else's brain,
Yeah, I think it's fascinating personally. Like I like speaking to one-man bands. We've spoken to a couple, and everyone's got their own perspectives on how it is, the writing process. But you have nobody else to tell you, oh no, this is good. Like, because you go through something when you're creating anything really. If you're doing it in a group or you're doing it, by yourself, there's always that person, oh no, this is good, trust me, like, this is what we need. And you're like, okay, maybe I'll go along with it. When it's yourself, you'd be like, oh no, I hate this, we're not doing this. So then you'll change your mind the next day. So to see like one man's creation is so much more interesting in my opinion than a whole band, because it's, this is exactly how they envision they want it to be. Like, I'm not in a band or anything like that. I'm not that musically gifted, even though I'd like to be.
You could be,
but
it's not that hard.
If I wasn't so lazy, maybe. But I always think in my head, like, if I created music, what would it be like? And how would I go about sharing that vision with somebody else? Would it be twisted and turned throughout all that, or would it be exactly how I envision it in my head? Probably not, because you have to bring everyone's influences to make a single project if you're in a band. So yeah, there's always one thing that's interested me personally. So it's cool.
Yeah, that what Brad just said reminded me of quite a funny story once. So Brad once asked me, "Oh, I'm thinking I want to try out vocals. Could you teach me? Like, because obviously you do them." And I'm like, yeah, I'll teach you. So literally, like before we were recording a podcast once, he went, "So how do you do like diaphragm stuff?" I'm like the easiest way to like sort of figure out where that muscle is probably to do like a dog bark. And he's there like, how? So like, I like literally just bark like a dog. And he goes, "Okay, can you show me?" So I'm literally there in his kitchen, like barking at him. And I'm like, "All right, now you do it." And Brad just goes, "Woo!" like a Scooby Doo fucking dog bark. I'm like, I was just dying straight away. Oh,
yeah, needs a bit of work.
like,
fair to say.
I think the only way to get it is to just try and embarrass yourself a lot, or do it in the car or something when no one can hear you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'll
What
do
I
that.
used to do is I used to turn my headphones on full blast, wait until everyone would leave the house, but I'd turn them on so I couldn't hear myself because I found it would be easier than record it on my phone just to hear how it sounded after, and that's how I would practice, because I found if I focused on how it sounded too much, I would like really really dislike it as it was coming out, and then like I'd hear it back going, actually I liked how that sounded.
Mm.
Yeah, I feel that way too. I try not to think about it, or even like I try not to push it too hard, because I feel like when I'm like really excited, or I'm really like pushing for like vocals to be like loud and hard, is when they kind of sound worse. There's like a sweet spot there, at least for me.
Yeah. Yeah, well, when I record vocals, I always make sure, like, like the monitor, I always make sure that it's like literally turned all the way down so I can't hear myself, so I can only hear the track. And then after, that's where I found like the easiest way for me to get like a clean take, because I find if I hear it back, I overthink it, and I'll go, that sounded shit, can I redo it? And I'll redo it over and over. But if I'm just listening to the track, I'll do it in like a couple, like 1 or 2 takes. So it's one of those things. It's like, I think everyone has their process, and eventually they're just like, they go, okay, this is how I work. And it's just a weird thing. It's personal to me, but I'll just do it like that.
I definitely keep the monitor low, and then if I need to hear myself more, I'll like pull one ear off the headphones or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
process. So, as the activist bringing the riff back slower and filthier, what would you say is the top 3 riffs that changed your life?
Changed my life? Oh shit. I mean, I guess it would have to be the things that influenced me most when I was young. So probably like Angel of Death by Slayer. My first time I heard that, I was like, this is crazy, what is it? Legion of Veracity by Suffocation. What else? There, got to think of a third. I don't know. Drawing a blank. I don't know.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm so happy you mentioned
Help me out.
Suffocation. I'm so happy you mentioned Suffocation. My first ever gig was Suffocation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, first ever one.
That's a good first.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those where it like opened my eyes a little bit. And ever since then I've always been a massive fan of Suffocation. So whenever I hear anyone mention them, I'm there like, hey, because
I think
they
Suffocation
are
had
unreal.
such a reach as well. Like, they're so influential in a way that I felt they get overlooked a lot for just how influential they were. Like, in the sense that I'm pretty sure they had a big hand in creating what slam is today by some of
But
their
they did.
earlier work.
100%.
Yeah,
They did like they full on created it.
I know, but I feel like it doesn't get talked about enough, like, because they actually were so influenced in that genre.
Yeah, I think the reach for sure is huge in that that band sort of created slam, created brutal death metal, and is still considered like an old school death metal band. Like everybody loves Suffocation,
Yeah, it's definitely an
yes.
impressive track record.
And you know that's crazy though, they're not talked about as much as like bands like Morbid Angel and Cannibal Corpse, even though I would say, like, I don't mean anything bad again, but I think they're better than most of those bands in terms of like
I agree.
how influential they were, as well as like just music.
I think they at least have more records that are good than any of those bands,
Oh yeah, we don't talk about the new Morbid Angel record, like the recent ones. Like after a certain point, it's like, let's just ignore that.
I mean, as a guy who's like 37 years old, like I haven't even heard them,
It's like one of those things where when I first got into like death metal, I'm like, oh yeah, like when you kind of discover a band, you listen to their first release, like sort of first.
Sure.
And like I remember, I think the album like almost literally just come out, and I gave it a listen, and I was there like, oh yeah, this is good. And then I listened to their older stuff, and I was there like, that was shit. What the
Yeah.
fuck, guy?
That's fine.
It's one of those things. It's like kind of like it's like, and it ends there. We'll just pretend it ends there. It's kind of like the last season, like Game of Thrones. It's like you watch it up until season 5, and then you go, in my head, that it ended there. There we go.
That's
Yeah.
the best way to
Talk
look at it,
about
to be honest.
Yeah.
That I literally
think-
just started. Go on.
I think
Sorry.
with bands, it's like a common thing that you have a really like sweet spot or a soft spot. I mean, for the first thing that you heard, like like any sort of like record that a band put out in the 90s, even if that band was around in the 80s, or or if they're around currently, like I kind of have a soft spot for the one that I first heard, even if it's
Yeah.
considered one of their bad ones,
Oh yeah.
Well, on the top of that,
Yeah, no.
like, bands that have been going a while, like say, for example, if you've been listening to a band for like almost 15 years or something like that, like, do you find it like hard to get interested in a lot of the new releases of the bands that you've, listened to for so long? Because I feel like the bar gets higher every time a new album comes out. And I feel myself personally getting like less impressed with bands that I've loved for so long. Like there's some that knock it out the park every time, but there's some that I'm just like, it's kind of getting progressively worse to me, but I can't tell if it's because I've just listened to this band so much. And so, everything that comes out, I feel like I've heard it before, or if it's just coming with age that I just get more picky. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just that for me, a classic record appeals to me partly because it's good, but partly because of how it makes me feel.
Yeah.
And even with like Suffocation, like I haven't heard the new Suffocation album, and it might be great, but it's not going to make me feel like Effigy of the Forgotten did, or like Pierce from Within, or Despise the Sun, or whatever. So like, I just don't have a huge motivation to listen to it,
Yeah. It's like,
Like,
the
even if it's-
nostalgia factor.
even if it's a better album, it's just like, well, I mean, I already have the albums that I love, Maybe that's a closed-minded way of looking at things. I don't know.
I
But
don't think it is, to be honest. Like, I feel like it's got the nostalgia factor in there as well. Like when you first hear a band, it's so hard to recreate how you felt in that moment. And even for the first year or two that you listen to when you're proper, like, super fan of this band, like for them to be able to surpass that, they got to be fucking sick. Like they've got to bring something that is an absolute game changer for the genre. But it doesn't always happen, to be honest. And there's only like a select few bands that I've listened to for so long that I can say I'm loving their albums, maybe even progressively more than the first ones I heard. It doesn't happen there, not often.
I'm
Yeah,
just
no,
an old and grumpy, and I don't like new things.
I find that I always burn myself out on like releases. Like what I'll do is I'll find one band, obsessively listen to them for like the next month, listen to everything they did, and then like when they release something new, I'm like, well, you know what? Like last month, I kind of listened to you every day. So I'm really, really into this one at the moment. I'm gonna come back to it, and then I never do. I always go to like more like underground sort of like bands now, like rather than like the main bands. Like Brad will be like, "Oh, have you listened to the new like Trivium album?" Or like, "But have you listened to this? They've only got 2 listeners on Spotify." Like, like stuff like that. Where I'm like, she's like, "This is really good."
Yeah.
I find myself gravitating to that because I find like when a band is smaller, that's when they're better, in my opinion, because they've got the rawness to them.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when someone's like releasing their like early stuff, I think that's when you find that it's like the strongest, like in terms of writing, because they're like, now this one's got to top this one, this one's got, and then like if they got bigger, it's like a point where they just kind of become kind of complacent. They go, fuck it,
Yeah, well,
we've made money.
I think, or I don't know if anyone's making money, but yeah, I feel like it's definitely a thing when a band writes their first album, you're hearing, I guess, youthfulness, but you're also hearing them write songs because they have fun writing songs with their friends. And then when you hear their, I don't know, 10th album, you hear them writing songs for their 10th album, there's no way around that. That's just the way it works when you make music. Like if people start listening to your band, you're going to start making music for that record, you know, like, yeah. I don't know.
It sounds almost like, you know, there's a lot of bands that they end up trying to sound like they're trying to cover themselves. You know, they're trying to recreate these early albums, all they go completely in a different direction. That's just musically not what you've heard from them before. And like, it's a bit of a grey area, to be honest, because I think that's something, as you know, most metalheads feel is like, I don't want them to sometimes go completely in a new direction, but you don't want to recreate the old stuff. So then it's like, the band's probably like, well, what the fuck do we do then? But then sometimes they've got to get the sweet spot in between, I think.
Especially when like an older band, you know, they go off in the weeds and they do some crazy shit like Morbid Angel did or whatever, and then they try and like take it back or whatever and like do a return to form. And like, no, you already made the bad album. Like, just keep going. You obviously were like feeling yourself. You were doing something that you thought was new and exciting, and it excited you. So I want you to do the thing that excites you. I don't want you to be like, oh, we fucked up, we're gonna make another album with blast beats. You know, like,
I couldn't agree more, to be honest. Like, I'm all for that. Just do you
go all the way, or don't even try.
Yeah, if you're gonna U-turn, at least commit to it. Don't be like, yeah, just be like, you know what, we're sticking with this, and if you don't like it, then I'm sorry, but we're gonna stick with it, lads. You know what I mean, we're just gonna fucking stay here and we're gonna do it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so as well, what would you say is like the top 3 bands in your opinion that are the most slept on, like the most underrated, sort of on the top topic of smaller bands and underrated albums?
Well, I mean, that's a huge question, but I guess for death metal, I would say, I'll just make a weird sound. I would say Severed Savior is definitely one. I don't know if you guys are very familiar with them, but they put an album out. Well, they did one like an EP in '99, which was really good, and then they did what I consider their masterpiece in 2003, and then they just kind of like faded away, and then came back in 2012 with another album. That's the one that people are sort of like, oh yeah, that's their best album, and maybe it is like, you know, their best album, but their second album, Brutality is Law, is the one that I think doesn't get enough attention. It's like so good. If you listen to it and you listen to the first Unurnment thing, the demo, you'll find riffs on there that I just completely just took because I love it. I guess another band that I feel like gets maybe not the respect that they are due is Impaled.
Yeah,
which is like, you know, there was a time in the late 90s, early 2000s when like this carcass worship thing was getting pretty big. Like Razorback Records was putting out a bunch of these bands that sound like Carcass, and Exhumed got pretty big. And Impaled, which has always had members of Exhumed in and out of it, just kind of got left behind, it seems like. But Impaled is, to me, one of my top 5 favorite bands of all time. Yeah.
Would you say they were the better version of Exhumed then?
It's hard to say they're better. I think they're different in a way that appeals to me. They do this thing that not a lot of bands do that I am sort of into because I'm a fucking dork. It's like everything has a concept. Like they overthink everything in a way that I think is so interesting. Like when you're looking in the, you know, this CD booklet or like reading along with the lyrics, it's like you thought of fucking everything. There's a whole world that you built in this album. And most of the people that are listening to it don't give a shit, you know, but like it's there and I love it. So
yeah, one of the bands that we interviewed, like our first interview, a band called Cryptic Shift. I don't know if you've heard of them.
They're from the UK.
Yeah, from my hometown.
Yeah.
When they told us how like the story behind their album, I was like they'd written basically like a sci-fi novel for the album, like, and told us the
massive
full
Star
thing.
Wars fans.
Yeah, I remember being sat there talking to him, and Xandar and Ryan were sort of like talking about like everything that it's about, and I was there like, have you like thought about getting like this published? Because like I was like, this could be like a legit film. Like this is like really good stuff. But you're like, oh yeah, you know. But like they were just saying like, oh, this is the full story, and I'm like, so he went, and then like the second one will probably be like a follow on the ending, which was he was just telling us this full story what it was about, and I was like, shit. And like there was not many people that do stuff like that. Like I remember Nocturnus did it as well, like where they kind of had like a story behind. But there's so many people that just don't do it. It's like, oh, this is just a song about this. Like
Sure.
that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I love putting that much thought into things. I guess love is the wrong word. I hate it, but it's something that I do. Like the concept of things is kind of like big for me. I like to put it all in there and sort of don't tell anyone about it and see if people notice it, or or even like not necessarily with like stories or whatever, but with like musical things. Like I'll put something in the music that is a callback to something else, and I want people to see that.
I think
Doesn't happen very often, but
it adds some sort of depth to albums. I like it. There's so much thought going into the concept that there's little Easter eggs in there that only people that truly, know will actually know. We've also
Easter
spoken
eggs.
to, yeah, Easter, like in a game when you get Easter eggs, and it's what reminds me of that. When we spoke to a band called Paleface as well, and they did like 3 albums that are like a 3-part story. It's basically made their own fucking metal Marvel universe, to be honest, which is amazing. Like I don't think it's something that should be hated. It's just fucking sick that people do that, because it's another layer of music that gets slapped on a lot. So it's nice to see.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like once you find that out, I think you appreciate the music more, because then you're like, because
The
it's
care
like
that went into it.
yeah, because if someone's gone through all that effort, you better fucking enjoy the EP or the album. Like,
Too right.
like if anything, it's kind of like I prefer. I'm on the same page. I prefer when people, if anything, overthink each song, because it's like, well, if you're not overthinking it, then like I find it hard that a lot of, so there's some bands that will just write like an EP and they'll be like, that's perfect. Like for me, I find like if I write music, I'm there like, right, but let's just sit on it for like a couple months. We'll listen to it again, and then we'll add stuff to it that we feel like we need to add to it. And then obviously all my bandmates are like, what's the point of doing that? But I'm like, because if I'm gonna release this, it needs to be fucking perfect.
Yeah, I think yeah, I'm there with you. I also don't want to force anything down anyone's throat. So like that's where like if you want to listen to Self-Immolation Suite and just hear 5 songs, that's great. Like that's fine. That's there for you. But if you want to know, if you want to read along and see a story happening, like that's also there for you.
Yeah, no, that's really nice, I think. And then, well, in the terms of a depth in an album, if you were given the opportunity to pick a movie to accompany Self-Immolation Suite, what would you choose?
No. I don't know. I mean, definitely not a horror movie, because I don't think Unurnment has horror lyrics in the way that a lot of death metal bands do.
Yeah.
It's a lot of like a lot of, I guess, the lyrical themes in Unurnment are pretty much solely focused on like the disintegration of someone's mental health.
Yeah.
And all of the things that happen in their mind told in this like fantastical death metal English way. Like when you read these lyrics, they look like death metal lyrics about like fire and flames and bodies burnt to a crisp, but it's all like, I guess, metaphorical or whatever. It's all, you know, it's all dealing with someone's own personal anguish.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah. Can you think of a movie that is like that? I don't know.
Pick something like Shutter Island, maybe.
Never seen it, but I've heard
It's really good. I'd recommend it. Like on that sort of subject of the lyrical themes, because I remember the artwork for it was, I feel like it really encapsulates those themes, to be fair, because it is like such a insane sort of image. What was like the process of getting the artwork done? And like,
it was that artwork was actually found by Scott from Maggot Stomp. We had art is kind of not the thing that I think about as much as like music and lyrics. And so I had the music completely done, and I turned it into Scott, and he was like, "Okay, well, what do you want to do for art? Like, who should we get to do the art?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Like, I don't particularly care or have an opinion on art most times." And so we hired someone to do the art, and it was really cool, but it didn't look like an album cover to us. And so we decided not to use it. And then there was just a few months there where we would sort of like brainstorm through text or whatever, but weren't really getting anywhere with the art. And then Scott just found this image from an artist named Kyle Harmon on Instagram. And he's like, "Oh, this is cool. You want me to see if he'll like let us use this?" And I was like, "Yeah, great. Yes. It looks cool." And then he hit up Kyle, and Kyle, they did the deal, and that's the art for the EP. So
awesome.
But it works. I mean, it's it's a song about lighting yourself on fire, and that's a melty face. So
that's a given.
Checks out,
So we've spoken about music. I want to hear, what are your hobbies and interests outside of music, or what do you like to do? What do you to pass the time?
Well, I watch a lot of movies. I make cocktails. They're like a home bar thing behind there.
Oh yeah, I can see the shakers in the background. I've got like a similar set myself.
You should have told us you make cocktails, because Brad has this question, and it's always a 50-50, because sometimes it works out really well, sometimes it works out really poorly. Where it's like, if your music was a cocktail, what cocktail would it be? Literally,
I like stupid questions like this. I don't know.
We asked Richard from Cradle of Filth, and he gave like he really, really thought about it. But then sometimes we've got him like, "Oh, fucking hell, I don't know shit about cocktails." Like,
I know some shit about cocktails. If my music was a cocktail, I would say it's probably Don Beach's 1934 recipe for the zombie, because it's
love a zombie.
Very strong and very complex. There's tons of ingredients in it, but it's all just perfectly balanced and delicious.
That's a good answer.
You fucked up.
If we had a Hall of Fame for good cocktail answers, you'd definitely be up there. Yeah, no, and to be fair, zombie is a very good cocktail. It's one of my go-tos, I think, when I'm out and about. Like a strawberry daiquiri, but hard to find
a place that will make it, because that's one of those drinks that just over the last 90 years has just had like the recipe was originally a secret, right? So so bars had like 70 years to get it wrong before the real recipe came out, and now they've had 20 years to get it right. And so you still, like, if you order it at like a tiki bar, you don't know what you're gonna get. You might get something with pineapple juice and passion fruit syrup, and you might get like a cinnamon and grapefruit juice thing. I guess that's like part of the fun and excitement of it.
It's interesting to see, because like a lot of places do zombie very differently. Like, for example, there's a town near us called York, and I went to a place there and they did it with fucking absinthe in it. So that was a pretty strong one. But then there's another place in Leeds, which is probably one of my favorite bars to go to for a zombie. They actually set it on fire. So visually, it's pretty cool.
Got the absinthe here.
Oh shit. Is that like the proper absinthe then? Because I know there's like some sort of watered down versions. Is that like the actual?
No, actually, I have a bottle of absinthe, but it's such a powerful thing, and when you use it in cocktails, recipes usually call for like 6 drops or whatever.
Yeah.
So I keep it in a dropper bottle, and I just kind of drop it.
Awesome.
Absinthe, like seeing it, like it makes it, because you know when you have a drink and then like you end up like being ill on it. It makes
Sure.
like whenever you smell, see it, or like anything like you're there, like, I remember that one night. I remember once I was at like a bar and I was just talking to some guy. I know it was after a gig. I was just talking to some guy. He was wasted. I was quite tipsy, and I was like, he went, do you want some absinthe? I'd never tried it before. Didn't know what to expect. So he just hands me this little bottle of absinthe, and I'm like, it's probably like whiskey. I could probably take a good mouthful of this. And I chugged it a little bit, and I was like, this was the worst decision I've ever made in my entire life.
You don't chug absinthe.
No, I really like. So now every time I see it or smell it, and they're like, I remember that one night.
How did you get into cocktails then? Was it like something that it's just gradually over time you just figured you like cocktails, or was there a pinnacle moment?
I think when you're a punk or like a metal guy, you start to get into your like 30s, you start to find other hobbies. Like for a lot of people, that's like motorcycles or fucking CrossFit, or like you become a barber or a skinhead or something. And I think for me, it was just like, I used to keep some bottles up here, and then eventually like I got a lot of bottles, and my partner was like, you can't keep those like on the shelf in the kitchen. And I was like, oh, okay. So I would have to like put them in a box somewhere, and then she was like, you want me to get you like a bar cart for Christmas? And I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. So she got me this bar cart behind me, and then from there it's just kind of spiraled out of control, and now this whole, what you considered our dining room is now like a home bar / tiki bar type thing.
I'd say that's a good refurbishment, to be honest.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we eat food on the couch anyway, so like, why don't we dining room?
Yeah,
that's super awesome.
I remember you and Connor, Brad, have gotten into cocktails, because I remember when we had that like house party pretty recently. Because remember when you both put a message in the chat, and you're like, who wants to make some cocktails? We're gonna get some ingredients. I didn't see it at all. I remember seeing them making this cocktail, and then like 10 minutes later, it looked amazing. I was there like,
yeah, that was a zombie.
Can I have some? Yeah, you are like, can I have some? And you're there like, no, you didn't buy any ingredients, motherfucker. Yeah. There's enough for two.
The other thing that I'll say is, if you're drinking alone, making it a hobby is a lot more fun than just like sitting on the couch and drinking a bunch of beers. Like looking up recipes. Like I pretty much only drink like on the weekends. So like I'll like looking up recipes and like screen capping them on my phone. Like, oh, I'm gonna try that this weekend, and then experimenting. I'll often go into a weekend being like, all right, I'm gonna make every type of zombie this weekend, or like, like I just got this this new rum. Like, I'm gonna make a bunch of drinks with this one particular type of rum, and sort of like explore. It's an exploration.
Yeah, I think the creative process of like making cocktails is just as fun as actually drinking it. You actually feel slightly productive because you've done something creative, like you've created the drink, and now you feel like you've earned the drink in a way. So like me and my girlfriend, and I'm excited because it's coming up to like Christmas time. And last year we were making like all kinds of festive cocktails. So we made like an apple pie one when you heat up in the pan, and it's like cinnamon, apple, rum, and it was like, it's to die for. Honestly, it was so good.
Great.
Yeah. I love cocktail making.
I kind of want to get into it, mainly because I don't really drink, except if I'm in social situations. I find that like because of that, I tend to binge when I'm in social situations. But I can't. I'm not one of those guys that can sit there and have a beer. But I feel like if it was like a stressful day, I'd still want to drink. But I don't want to be one of those guys that just sit on the sofa and just drink this beer. And he's there like, it's a bit depressing when I'm on my own just drinking beer. I feel
Sure,
like I
then-
need to do something like where it's like actually feels like creative and productive to like enjoy it as much.
Yeah.
Turn it into an expensive hobby. It'll feel completely different.
I agree.
Oh, trust me, I'm used to I'm used to like pretty expensive hobby because I've got into film photography. Yeah, no. Every time I go to like the film shop, like every time I go to the camera shop, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get some film. I'm like, oh, it's gone up in price again. Shit.
It's expensive.
Um, yes, so I was also I did a bit of a deep dive as well. And I knew you was in a band called Primal Right. Um, and I gave it that a listen as well, and that had a lot of hardcore like influences in there. Is hardcore something that still sort of influences you now during like your writing process? Is it something that you kind of just you go, okay, I did that, but I want to do this now?
Yeah, no, I mean, I sort of got into metal and hardcore at the same time as a teenager. And I would say most of the bands I've been in have been hardcore bands. I consider myself a punk, but like, yeah, it's hard. I mean, I wouldn't even say it's a conscious influence. It's just that I'm a hardcore guy and I like death metal. So the influence is unavoidable,
Yeah,
with
I've
like
literally only. Oh god, sorry.
the the dive bombs and everything. Like when I play a dive bomb, I'm not playing. I don't have fucking like Kerry King in mind. I'm thinking of like Warzone or whatever, or like a band that did like or Integrity, like doing like a dive bomb in a hardcore context.
Oh yeah, I literally only just kind of recently got into it, and then it was one of those things where I listened to it. I was like, "Where's this been all my life?" Because I've always loved punk, because I don't know what it was. I felt more driven to punk as well. Like when I got into metal, I kind of went through a punk phase. Like later on, when I felt like I'd listened to a lot of metal and kind of burnt myself out on, and then listened to a lot of punk, and then hardcore like is the perfect mix of both. I think, especially
Yeah.
like modern hardcore now. I feel like it's very like, is it or is it metal? Is it hardcore? Is it metal? Like there's a lot of bands that are splicing the genre.
Yeah, I think in recent years, hardcore has definitely become its own thing. Whereas like when I was younger, hardcore and punk were much more closely related. Uh, like in like when I was a teenager, it seemed like all the hardcore kids considered themselves punks, and now that's not really a thing, which is that's cool. But
Yeah, I always find it.
I'm definitely more into like the punk side of hardcore.
Yeah, I always find it crazy that there's been like this separation because now like obviously like hardcore kids are just hardcore kids. It used to be like, oh, they are punks, like, but now it's just like it's its own separate little thing. But I do find it crazy where it's just like everyone's like, I was like, there's like these catchy terms like metalheads, punks, but then it's just like, oh, hardcore kid.
Yeah, it is kind of weird as like an old and maybe possibly like out of touch guy to meet hardcore kids who didn't get there through punk. Like they haven't heard like classic punk records or even classic hardcore records. It was just like a thing, like, oh, my friends were into hardcore, got me into hardcore. Like, love hardcore, It's like, whoa,
Yeah,
like, you haven't heard like the Dead Kennedys or something, like, or
yeah,
Black
because
Flag or something, even like that stuff that you can buy like a T-shirt at the mall. It's very strange.
well, that's what's crazy because I remember like I'll speak to hardcore kids and they'll be like, oh yeah, no, I used to like and the same thing, they'll never listen to punk, and like I'm like, that's crazy because I remember like really going through Dead Kennedys and stuff like that, and I remember like finding like hardcore, like the old hardcore punk bands, and that's how I kind of got into it. And it's like crazy to think that now there's people there that are actually going, I literally just listen to hardcore, and it's like, I'm like, I'm quite a young person, but I'm now like I can't imagine like jumping into hardcore straight away. I feel like you need to have some kind of like, like
Like,
gateway band from either side of metal or punk to be able to get into it.
I guess the cool side of that is that you don't need the gateway bands anymore because you can just discover the cool shit immediately. You know,
Oh yeah,
That is very true.
when I was younger, the internet was definitely a thing, but there was still, there was a path you had to go down and get into all these like obscure things. And now it's all just there in front of you. You can just be like, "What's that? No, that sucks. I want to do that one." Like,
Yeah,
so that's
probably
cool.
due
I
to
guess
accessibility, I
you're
imagine.
like, yeah, you're definitely like saving a lot of time.
oh yeah. Because now like I think hardcore's become my hardcore and like death metal are my two go-to genres. Like I very rarely deviate from that now. I'm like the thing is I know for a fact that I like hardcore and I know for a fact that I like death metal. Any other like subgenre or anything like that, I find that I'm like it'll be 50-50 whether I like it or not. But I'm like most hardcore or death metal records, I always really like. Like
Yeah,
So
wish I could say the same.
So we are sort of getting to the end point of the interview now. One way that we always like to leave it is, what advice would you give to your younger self, and what advice would you give to like a younger artist that just starting out wanting to get into music?
My advice to myself and to people who are just getting into it is the same. That is, if you're gonna do it all the way. Like, if you want to be in a touring band, tour all the time.
Yep.
If you want to put out a lot of music, work on it every day. That's not something that I did, and I wouldn't say I regret it, but like, it would be, at this point in my life, I don't want to go on tour all the time, but I kind of wish I had
Yeah.
when I was in my 20s.
Mm.
And in my 20s, I was like, oh, I can't go on tour. I have work. My work will take time off. And it's like, I should have just fucking quit that job. Didn't make that much money. Like, so yeah, my advice is, if you're gonna do it, then do it hard.
Yeah, I like that. But thank you so much. It's been a really good chat. You created an amazing EP last time, very immersive and seamless transitions. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you're going to put out next.
The next thing is going to be my other band, Abysmalist, has a record coming out. Which I guess I can't share the details of, but it's recorded and it is coming out early next year.
Oh yeah, excited to hear that, to be honest. And yeah, nice to talk to you about cocktails as well. Keep mixing up and creating some nice recipes. And yeah, I'll probably be doing the same, to be honest. Got some sangria cocktail ready to go, so I'll probably be brewing that this weekend.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you and getting you on. But yeah, make sure when obviously your other band drops the out, like like the new record, please just let us know, because I really want to listen to it.
Likewise,
because I really love the EP that you did, because it's one of the reasons I was like really blown away from it. So yeah, keep it up, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.